everyone, Susanne here from the Project Manager Clinic, and I'm here today with Tim Catley, who is a partner at Pivot Point Partners. And Tim's got a huge amount of experience in IT, large scale projects. He's actually at a train station, so we're very fortunate to have him today. And we're going to talk about how good design reaps the benefits in project delivery. So, what is it going to take to help us get that success in project delivery? So, just before I throw to Tim to introduce himself quickly, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give us a thumbs up below, and let's get going. So, Tim, a bit about yourself.
A bit about me. Oh, well, it's a long story. I've been doing technology for a while. So, senior engineer, worked in professional services, been a CIO for 25 years in both public and private sector. Gone back to my consulting roots now to run my own business, Pivot Point Partners, where we specialize in advice on things strategy, architecture, and program delivery.
And you and I have known each other for a long time, and we've worked together on many occasions, and we've had numerous discussions about project success. I think the projects that we've worked on have been pretty successful, but there are reasons why projects can be successful, and there are reasons why they're not successful. So we're talking today about a good design. So when we're talking about good design in this instance, what are we talking about?
Well, good design for me. Well, I think when you hear about design, people often assume that you're talking about a solution. Whereas,
Yes.
today we're going to talk more about how you design your program to be successful. And
Yes.
where I think we have been successful and in the past is that we have thought hard about how the program is designed to ensure that that it gets off to a great start. And as you know, a great start is a pretty good indicator that you're going to have a great finish as well. So so designing your program, that's not just thinking about how you break the work down, it's thinking about how you minimize risk, how you pick the right team, how you ensure you have adequate effort and time to do your planning in the right way, and then to ensure that you have sufficient time to cater for those unexpected things that rock up in every program.
Yeah, it really is a thoughtful process. Very often, project managers get pressured to deliver a schedule. I mean, that's just happened to me so many times. Where's the schedule? Where's the schedule? Where's the schedule? I've been fortunate probably to have done the bigger program so that there's a little bit more leeway for me to say, look, we're going to plan an approach or a strategy for how we're going to do this program. How do you think most people cope? Do you think that this is something that is accepted, that good design is a thing that will make us more successful?
I think that a lot of effort goes into some of the documents that precede a program. So, for example, the business case.
Yeah.
And if you've been involved in developing the business case, you'll know that there's always a lot of work that goes into, defining the numbers and getting that right. But often
Yeah.
there's a crunch then. Oh, well, we don't have that much money in the budget. We don't have this, we don't have that. So, and often that will translate into, schedule compression, scope, production up front. And that for me often has a material impact on how well prepared programs are to mobilise and whether they adequately cover things like scope and resourcing, more technical complexity.
Mm. And look, you've been involved in large programs from an executive level for many, many years, and you've also got a very good technical ability yourself. So we've talked a little bit about, risk and planning and budget and resources, but how important is the actual design or the design thought or process when we're looking at a program or project at the start?
I think it's very important. I think, I think it's like anything. The larger the program, the more complexity is there, the more I think you need to be considering ensuring you have adequate design time in that program, and that you're looking about design. You're not just talking about the technology solution. You're talking about the
Yeah.
organisation of the program, the time you're allowing for in the schedule for critical activities, ensuring you have the right team mobilised. In my experience, mobilisation often takes longer than everybody thinks, and then you're behind the eight ball on day one because you haven't taken more time to mobilise, and you've burned more money and lost more time. So I think it's really critical, even for small programs or programs that are less complex. I still think more time spent in that planning phase reaps dividends through the process and gives you more certainty in the outcome, whatever you're looking for.
Yeah, and I'd be interested if you could talk a little bit about the right team. We all talk about getting the right team, but it's not always easy, is it? And then you've talked about mobilisation. So can you differentiate for us the difference between getting the right team, getting them on board, and what mobilisation means to you?
Look, it is always challenging to find the right people, particularly when you're looking for a skill set that can be that's not very common, or that you're working in a market where there is a huge amount of demand for certain types of skill set or certain types of resource. So I think it can be a challenge, and you've probably committed to a timeline in a business case, and maybe you haven't been able to line up the right resources at the start. But I think those critical. I think the mobilisation process is critical for the success of a program, and I think there's a bit of prep or planning you do when your business case is going through the process to identify the right resources, to select the right people, and to ensure that you do have the best possible team you can get on the ground on day one. I know that's easier said than done, but it is it's critically important.
It is important, and it's not just a mobilisation of maybe the vendors or contracted resources. It's a mobilisation of the whole team or all the resources, and getting those stakeholders ready to understand that something's going to happen and you're going to be involved in one way or another. From a consulting perspective, then. Do you think this is something that the organisations understand, or is that something that you have to really work at getting them to slow down to take the right amount of time?
Well, I think, I think for larger transformation programs, it's probably easier to mobilise business resources against those critical tasks. They're often, complex and expensive, and they can be great ways for people to develop or grow their career, or not, as the case may be. But I think what's essential in getting mobilisation of business resources is to ensure that there's full buy-in from the sponsor and from the rest of the organisation, and that's critical. Doing those phases to make sure that you are getting the right people on board, or you're getting the right people who can commit the time to the program going forward, because it can be a huge demand on critical business user time, and that makes it very difficult either to meet their other commitments around delivering revenue, profit, services. So that there is a lot of conflicting priorities that exist in those situations.
Yeah, there's a bit of a pull and push sometimes, a little bit of a tug of war. And I found in my experience that quite often, like I said at the start, they try and hurry you along. I'm able to stop them from hurrying me along because I can explain some of this process. And you talked about risk, looking at risk. So this is in the planning part of planning for program design, risk, budget, resources, design. So we're talking primarily of a technical solution, I guess, technical IT. I did a webinar just recently with a test manager, and we talked about the importance of thinking about the testing strategy, not super in depth, but right up front as well. So often that test manager is left right until the end. Are there other things that we need to be thinking about, do you think?
Well, certainly, look, I think I agree with that. Any assessment, test management gets brought in too late in many programs. I think the other thing I see a lot of in that regards is also data migration.
Oh,
And
yeah.
those two things often go hand in hand.
Yep.
You might in some small projects, you might find you've got a business analysis resources, and they're doing the business analysis, and then they're doing the test cases, and then they're doing
Yeah.
the testing. They get redeployed into those things. So and I think that's I understand why that occurs in smaller, less complex projects where there might be limited resources, but in larger,
Yeah.
more complex programs, they're very distinct disciplines,
Mm.
and early establishment, building the test cases at the same time, building the business requirements and starting data migration as early as you possibly can, I think is really critical.
And when we talked about this in the
And
other webinar,
additionally now, sorry, the other thing I'll say there,
yes,
additionally, is also things like security become much more important now
yes,
to get addressed early on in design as well.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh, when we talked about this before in the other webinar about testing, um, a lot of project managers don't think about this. They don't think about that testing part. They sort of leave it towards the end. And you've sort of touched on cybersecurity as well. Um, how important is change management and other areas like the use of AI in the planning, like when we're talking strategy?
I don't think I can comment on AI in planning. I think planning. I'm not sure how that would planning. Maybe there is something there. Maybe there's something that allows you
Yeah,
to, build your schedule in a certain way, or maybe it allows you to pull risks out. I don't
yeah,
know, but I haven't seen anything there that gives me confidence. I'm sure there is something in that space.
yeah,
I think in terms of change management, again, that's something you can start early. I think if you think about um, the need to bring people along for the journey, it's probably one of those things where you can start off relatively thin and then build out that capability as you go closer to the to delivery. I think it is aligned a bit until you really know what the requirements are. It's a little more difficult to understand the exact impact of change.
yes,
But certainly there's an ability to start the journey early on and bring people along, particularly for long-running projects or programs where
yeah.
people can get a little disconnected from what's going on.
Yeah, look, exactly. And, I've been on a few projects in the recent years, actually, where 12 months in, and I'm not managing the project, but 12 months in, they still don't have their scope locked down. So we're still seeing this sort of behaviour out there. 12 months in uh, to a project that's underway, the scope's not nailed down. The requirements aren't always clear. And we've talked about this in another webinar, the need to not just do the project planning and the strategy work and then put that in the drawer. It's not a living document, but it's got to be reviewed or somehow stay fresh throughout the program. I'm not sure if you're understanding what I'm saying, but things change over the course of a project.
The longer a program runs, the more stuff changes around it in the business. So inevitably, you've got a program that runs for 3 or 4 years, then
Yeah,
inevitably the business is changing, and that's going to have a material effect on it may have a material effect on your requirements.
yeah,
Look, and I think also the thing with scope is, as you get further into the design of something, you invariably elaborate the scope more, right? So maybe there's more requirements. You dig into a requirement, and it turns out to be 5 requirements, not one. Or maybe
yeah,
there's you come to do the architecture, the solution architecture, and you identify a couple of systems that weren't identified previously. So I think the process of elaborating the design is likely to change the scope, possibly materially sometimes.
yes.
That's something you need to make provision for in your, as a risk, I guess, in terms of, time, cost.
Time and cost.
Yeah.
How do we stop being surprised by other project dependencies that seem to crop up on some projects, almost like nobody knew it was ever coming?
Well, I do. Again, I think that can sometimes be part of elaborating the scope of the design. You don't.
Yeah,
Um, um, I think and that has a lot to do with the amount of effort that might be put into the business case, for example. So, and again, hope, if things have been done correctly, then you've allowed some of that in your risk allowance in terms of time
Yeah.
impact.
Yeah.
But I think unless you do the whole design, you're not really going to be able to bottom out all of those areas of scope. I think you don't want to. It's probably missing something big would probably be a little bit unforgivable. I won't be unforgivable, but you are, as you dig into scope and
Yeah.
technology and requirements, you are going to flush out things that you didn't identify, and that's why you feel risk. That's why you feel
Particularly,
risk into.
yeah, and particularly if you're still communicating with people about where you're at.
Yeah, and look, just because you flush something out that looks like scope doesn't necessarily mean you have to address it. It could be, I think one of the things that having a project or a program that's been allocated a lot of funding is everybody sees that as a bit of a vehicle to get the things that they wanted but never ever been able to get. So
Yeah.
You've got to be clear that that's if you identify some new scope, you've got to be clear that that scope is necessary to deliver the program that you've been asked to deliver.
Yeah. And like, I'm just going to start wrapping up now because I know that you're in the train station, but because I've worked with you before many times, but one of the times I worked with you, we were on quite a big transformation program, and the way that Pivot Point actually started that planning process, and it wasn't just unplanned workshops. It was a targeted and thoughtful way of working through what the scope is going to look like. Is there anything that you can elaborate on there? Is that something that is particular to how you do this or not?
No, I think what we, as we have developed, as I've become more experienced and done more programs, and as we develop the way we work, I think that's become part of our approach. And I think our experience tells us that gets better long-term outcomes from programs. It doesn't mean that you don't identify extra scope at some point, or you don't identify, additional technology capability you need to slow down on, but it does mean that you're minimising that risk as much as you can at that stage of the program.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So I think what we're both saying is the project design, and commonly called planning, but it's more than that. It's actually the planning part is then designing how, for me, we're going to approach the project. What's the strategy? How is it going to be delivered? There's a lot of components that we've both talked about. You've specifically talked about those sorts of things, the importance of continuing the conversation, highlighting where there might be discrepancies in scope. For me, a lot of it is the importance of being visible and saying no when you're putting your hand up and saying, well, hang on, I think we've got a problem here. In your experience, are there any key things that we could tell our project managers out there to be looking for?
Oh, I think you've touched on some things there that are really important. Is really managing your scope effectively.
Yeah.
I think we're talking about making sure you're really designing your program. You're not just building a schedule and a budget and those sorts of things. Thinking about actually the organisation, thinking about how the governance works, thinking about how you're going to interact when you're going to start things like data planning for data migration, or when you're going to start thinking about testing and how you do that. So those sorts of approaches need to be identified early on in the process. And I think there is that. Look, I think realistically there are you always get that pushback at the business case level where you may have done that design and then see it's going to cost us too much, there's not enough benefits, whatever. So it's just making sure that when you go through that process, you're confident that you're setting your program up to be successful. And you don't always get what you want. There's always a squeeze on money and time and whatever. But it's making sure that you can you're as prepared as you can up front, and that you've really got a good handle on the risks that are coming down that may be manifesting themselves through the process you've used to design the program.
Yeah, yeah. Can you, just the last question, can you quickly give me an example of you, or have you got a feel for, in your past history, something that worked really well, that was really successful?
Well, I think we've touched on a lot of the things that I apply now. I think one of the things that I've done on large programs that I found very successful is bringing data migration forward to the beginning of the program, not the end.
Yeah.
So to make sure that that data, that work on data starts really early in the process. I think that drives that takes a lot of angst out of that data migration quality issue at the back end of a program. I think for me, one of the key differentiators is how good your team is, and I think taking time to pick the right people, and to build the right team, I think is really, really critical as well. I mean, you can do the best schedule in the world, and you can, have the best risk management, but if you don't have a great team, that can be problematic, and that can be particularly difficult when you're asking the business for resources as well. It can be hard to assess the capability of those resources. Hard to make sure you get the right people. Of course, everybody wants the right people working on their thing.
Of course, exactly. Look, I'm going to let you go because I know that, we're sort of talking to you on the fly. It's been a great conversation. For everybody watching, please subscribe to the channel. Give us a thumbs up. Thanks so much, Tim. And Tim's details will be in the description, so you can contact him and his organisation if you need help or you want some sort of more information about what we're talking about today. So thanks again, Tim.
Thank you very much, Susanne.